This is another Pioneer CT-F950 from the late 70s and the early 80s. This deck has been pretty comprehensively refurbished. I'll go into some of the details. But at this point, I want to show a couple of things. I'm going to go handheld so that you can actually see around. I'm going to talk about some of the things that have been done to this deck to refurbish it. On the back of the deck will be a sticker that is the service record, and it'll tell you what I've done to it. But essentially, I've replaced the left pinch roller. That pinch roller, when they go bad, will eat your tapes. Essentially, what will happen is the tape will begin to crease, and then it will then not recover and completely ruin the tape. That's been replaced. I also replaced the right pinch roller. The other one was pretty badly cracked. There is a height adjustment on this side. You have to be very careful how that's adjusted so that it doesn't get out of adjustment. I have a stop nut that I've added to it. Of course, the whole mechanism was taken out and kind of cleaned up, and the belts and the idler tire all replaced. I also always rebuild the rewind motor. The rewind motor operates at two different speeds based on the voltage going into it. So when you're playing a tape, take up is at one speed, but when you're rewinding or fast forwarding, it's at a different speed. And that gets a lot of wear and tear on it, so I always rebuild those. I did have to replace the meter board. There were some problems with it. The buttons had been broken off. The motherboard is mostly recapped. There are a few capacitors that I left in place because they didn't test badly. But the riser boards all have new capacitors. And when I say it's been recapped, and you have to watch for this, when somebody says they have recapped one of these decks, typically all they've done is replace the electrolytic capacitors, and that's all that I've done. The electrolytic capacitors are the capacitors that look like this. And these are some of the old ones, and this is actually one of the new ones that I had that was not in spec. So if a capacitor was not in spec, I didn't put it in, didn't replace it with a bad capacitor, obviously. But these are the kinds of capacitors that get replaced in these units, not the ceramic capacitors. Typically they're fine. I have found on occasion where some of the other capacitors are bad, but mostly they're fine. The other work that was done to it, there's a sensor switch up here to sense when you put a tape in. See this button right here? When that's pressed in, it will automatically retension the tape so that if there's any slack in it, it won't get misaligned. I replaced that. That was not working right. It was intermittently working for some reason, so I just put a new one in. And that's pretty much it from a replacement standpoint. What I also did, and I always do with these, is I shine and clean up everything. These are chrome plated plastic, and I was able to clean those up pretty nicely. Now we'll take a tour on the inside, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the unit. When you buy this unit, I want you to be very clear on a few things. These things have been sometimes lifted out of e-waste. You know, somebody's thrown them away. They have not been treated well over their life. This has a pretty good face on it. There are some minor blemishes on the bottom and on the sides, but your corners are in pretty good shape. This corner is a little bumped in, not too bad, but the corners look pretty good. Usually these are a mess. So the unit looks really very, very good. We're going to come back and do some recording. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that works. But I'm going to take you on a tour of the inside so you can see some of the things that have been done. And I'm going to do that right now, try to do that in less than 5 minutes. So when we take a look on the inside, as I said, I have rebuilt the motor, and I always mark that with a date. As I said, most of the capacitors have been replaced here. You can see these red capacitors there. They're audio spec capacitors. And some of the other black capacitors I had replaced as well. So, and these are the riser boards. These are your, this is left and right channel when you're playing back so that you can listen to it during a record session. The recording board, the bias. Under this bias plate are some capacitors. I replaced those, and this is a little Faraday cage that has to come off, but I replaced the couple of capacitors in there. I always put deoxit on all of the switches. You have to do that. They're going to, and if you don't use this unit very much, you're going to get some crackle. So you're going to have to work those and the potentiometers. The deoxit does a good job of cleaning it up and reducing the oxidation, but if you don't use it over time, it's going to come back and get a little dirty, but that's okay. You can just work the controls. The control board itself didn't need any work at all. I checked all the components to make sure everything was working fine. The only thing I usually replace but didn't need to be replaced was this capacitor. It has to do with the rewind, realizing that it's at the end of the tape. A lot of people replace capacitors on this board. These capacitors, I pulled them on another board. They're right in spec. So whatever Pioneer used for the power, high power capacitors, electrolytics, were pretty good. So they're not shot. They're in good shape. And that's about it on the inside. Of course, as I said, you've got new belts in here, and you've got a new idler tire. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to cut to another section, and we're going to record and play back. Okay, so we're going to get started by doing a quick tour. This is a 3-head deck, so that means that while you are recording, you can listen to what has just been recorded through the monitor, and that's when you put it on tape. When it's on source, it's whatever is playing at the time and coming through, but when it's on tape, it's what's just been laying down on that tape. There is a bias control, and I'll show you how that works. If you turn it left, it will brighten. If you turn it right, it will sort of dull the sound. It's not a tone, but it does have influence over how the recording is made on the tape. You have Dolby B. There is no Dolby C in the late 1970s. It came out in the early 80s on decks. You have the tape type that you're using. This deck supports metal. The 950 supported metal. The 900 did not. The 950 has a metal, and it has a little metal tape LED right here. Standard chromium dioxide or CO2 and ferrochrome, which are no longer, which weren't made for a very long period of time. I don't have any, and I don't test with them. We're going to test with a standard tape, which is what this is. You have an output. Now this output is in use when you're on tape monitor and when you're playing back. And then you've got your input level. Now these two have a left and right within the knob itself. They're aligned right now. Now on the display, you have a couple of different things that I'm going to talk about. This is the timer start. Timer start works pretty interestingly. I'm going to rewind the tape. When you have the timer start set to play, and you turn the unit on. This is back when you didn't have a way to time shift anything. So you could buy a timer that came along with in the same series as the Pioneer, and it would actually just turn the power on. And when the power is turned on and that switch is set to play, the unit will start playing. It will also, sorry, I've got that set. Turn that off. It will, if you have record pushed in, it will also start recording on a tape that doesn't have the notches broken out. Okay, so it's starting to record. And this was, you know, early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, the way that you might record a FM broadcast, for example. You'd set it everything up, and then you had your timer start up, and then it would record. Be careful, don't leave it on record, leave it on play if you're going to use it at all, because it will erase a tape and if you leave the tape in and turn it on and forget that. So you also have some adjustments for your meters. You have a peak hold. Peak hold will actually hold the highest segment that has been recorded or is playing back, and then average. Peak is a little slower, average tends to, sorry, the other way around. Peak is a little faster, average tends to flow a little more in the display. You've got counter, reset, 3-digit counter. Then you've got memory functions, and I'll show you how those work in just a minute. But essentially, what you can do is rewind to counter, rewind to end and start. You can tell it to stop or to play, which is kind of neat, because what you can do is you can set this to repeat, and when you have it in repeat mode, it'll play the tape, rewind it, and play it over and over again. It's not an auto reverse deck, but it will keep playing the tape over and over. So let's get to recording, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the functions. I'm on standard. I have a standard tape. I've got Dolby in, and I've got my tape monitor on. So as soon as I start this recording, I'm going to go over to my source, which is just the YouTube library, and we're going to start to play a selection. This is the source. This is what's coming through. And this is what it sounds like when it's recording. I'm going to turn up the volume so you can hear it a little better. That's what's coming in. That's what's actually being recorded on the tape. Now, listen when I turn this to the left. Okay, it gets a little duller all the way to the right. Now listen as I move it. Now we're going to play it back, and what I will say is I have seen very few cassette decks, even the more modern cassette decks in the 80s and the 90s, get the kind of frequency range that I'm able to get off of these tapes. It's amazing what these old decks could do. This is set to end. I'm going to rewind it, it's going to stop, and then it's going to start playing. Now notice, this bias isn't going to have any effect playing back at all. This is only on record. You can hear how it got a little brighter and then it'll get duller when I had changed that. When I changed the bias. And of course, if you take the Dolby off, you'll hear the tape hiss. This actually turns the output volume down, but you also notice it affects what you see on the meters. I'm recording, I'm using the tape monitor, but that's not affecting what's actually being recorded on the tape. What's being recorded on the tape is that. And that's where your input manages that volume level that's being put on the tape. So notice, doesn't matter what I do here when this is on source, but it does matter when I'm playing it back, and it works the same way on a normal playback of a tape. It does have a little detent at position 6. I don't know why it's not 5, but that's the design of the Pioneer. They're all like that. So I'll talk a little bit about this unit. The case top for this, and I'll show you in a minute, was in pretty good shape. It had some scratches on it, but I went ahead and painted it. So it's painted a flat black. And I'm going to go ahead and put everything together. I'm also going to turn this unit around while you're watching it so that you can see the serial number. And I think it's important because I've talked to other people who have sold these units and had buyers who swapped units and sent the old unit back, their unit, and essentially thought they were getting a new unit. I've talked to those sellers and they've opened up cases against those buyers, and those buyers have been barred from eBay because they've done the things that I do, which is I document it very carefully and I make sure that what you see is what you're getting. This serial number that you're about to look at is the serial number that's on this system. Let's see if I can get a good picture of that. You should be able to see it. It ends in 7969. Let's see if I can get a better view of that for you. Okay. And on the back, as I said, there's the service record, and I probably will print a new one and put it higher and then put the QA checklist on it, so it might look a little different on the back. This particular unit was made for different parts of the world. So right now it's set to 120 volts. It will work on 220 as well, so you could take it to England if you wanted to. And that's about it. So I'm going to put it together and then do a final once over so you can see what you're getting. This is the demonstration that shows that the unit will record on standard tapes, chromium dioxide tapes, or the CR02, the high bias tapes, and metal tapes. This is a standard tape. We've set the counter to 0. It's on tape monitor, so you will hear what's being recorded as it's recording. Dolby is in. And I'm leaving the bias right in the middle. Playing it back. Okay. Chrome tape. Set it to 02. Okay, playing it back. And then metal tape. Now remember, you can alter the bias for any of these. I might do that on the metal tape just so that you can see a difference there. All right. Reset. Oh, this does need to be on metal. Okay. Brighten it up a little bit. Now let's see how that sounds. I brightened it up a little bit. And there you have it. I'm going to go ahead and put the top on it, do a once over, and then it'll be ready for listing. All right, starting from the back, there's your 969. You've got a QA checklist, the service repair record, what was done to it. Those are removable. You can peel them off. You'll see that the case is has been painted. It's not the original paint on the case. It was in pretty bad condition. It was not too well. It was scratched, but the paint itself was not in great condition. So I cleaned that off and then painted it. It's just a metal case. Some of these had wooden cases as well. Now I'm going to take some quality pictures of this and get these up on the site. But for the most part, I think you can see it's in pretty good condition. And it's going to be up on eBay shortly.